Good afternoon, and many thanks to Bill for inviting me. And there are so many people to whom I want to thank. All the other presenters and the many angels that are around and helping, and everybody who is here, because this wonderful event would not be the same if only one person were missing. And also the many people who have prepared the flowers and the wonderful meals and who have swept the carpets. And when you begin to think about that, the ones who made the carpets and the ones who designed this hall, there is no end. We are in this web, in this social web of people who help people. That is a wonderful thing. And just to awaken to that is really an ultimate awakening. But my task will be this afternoon to speak about two questions. First, who is this that is awakening? And when we answer that question, or when we approach an answer to that question, we are already beginning to answer the next question, namely, what is it? What is awakening? What is that awakening? And then we have to add a third question, how can we stay awake? And that is an additional reason for me to be grateful to you, because this is the time when most people prefer to take a nap. So thank you for replacing your nap by listening to my sharing. And if you happen to take a nap at the same time, that's perfectly all right too. So let's ask ourselves, who is awakening? And each of us will certainly say, I, at least who wants to awaken, who is asking this question. And each of us will say, I. And if we want to emphasize it particularly, we'll say, I myself. Oh, very interesting. Are we now talking about one or two when we say I myself? Well, that's interesting. It's always so interesting to follow language. Heidegger, the great philosopher, thought of his philosophy as thinking along language. Not thinking about language, but thinking along language as one follows a path. You see. And this is a very helpful way of thinking, and I always try to follow words to what do they really mean. And one of the words we can follow together is that expression, I myself. And we ask, are there two? And the answer is absolutely no. I myself. That emphasizes the oneness. And yet, it expresses a doubleness. And the poet Rilke, to whom David White referred also yesterday, the poet Rilke speaks of us living in a double realm. It's very important for us to realize that we live in this double realm. He says, even though the reflection in the pond, that's his image, may get blurred for you, remember the image. Only in this double realm remains what you say true and lasting. And so it's one realm, and yet it's two, I, myself. What can we say about that self? The I is pretty obvious. It's running around here. But how about that self? Now, we can make a little experiment here, right, on the spot. and we can watch I can watch my I. I can't watch myself. I see I watch myself, but where's the self? All I see is a body. Somebody. I am somebody. So I discovered that somebody. And I can watch that body. And we can all now watch our body. Sitting there or standing here talking. And as we go further and further back, that's of course only an image. Where do we go when we watch? But the image rings true to most people. It's like a zoom that goes back and watches from ever greater distance until we reach the point we are watching, where we are that watcher whom nobody can watch anymore. That's not difficult. As long as you can watch the watcher, you're not there yet. But when you get to the point where you are watching and you are the watcher whom nobody watches, that's the self. You have reached the self. And that self is a very mysterious reality, because our body is obviously in space-time. But that self, in order to watch what is in space-time, is no longer in space-time. So we have reached a realm of our own being, of this double realm. We have reached a level of that double realm in which each one of us belongs to something that belongs to all, and that is that self. Because it cannot be divided. If something is not in space, and if it were in space, it couldn't do that kind of watching that we are talking about. And since it's not in space and time, it is not in time either, and it cannot be divided. So it's one for all of us, and that it isn't in time, we are all aware of that. We know this all the time, because when I was a child, I was myself, and when I was an adult, I was myself, and if I live tomorrow, I will certainly be myself, or I won't be around. So wherever we are our self. The self is always present. The self is not in time, but the ego, the I, is in time. The I is here all the time. Now, this great self that unites us all, that's one for all of us, that has been referred to and has been extremely important in all the great spiritual traditions, because this discovery of the self is something basically human that doesn't belong to one tradition or the other. If you are human, you can discover yourself. And the different traditions gave it very different names. Hindus call it Atman, Buddhists call it Buddha nature, the Christians call it the cosmic Christ, or the Christ in you. Apostle Paul writes, I live, yet not I, Christ lives in me. That doesn't mean privately in me. Christ lives in you, Christ lives in you. It's the Christ reality, so to say, that unites us. And the Christians call it Christ reality, and the Buddhists call it Buddha nature. And here we come to the poem that David read yesterday, and it was a wonderful poem. It was one of my favorite ones, As Kingfishers Catch Fire by Gerard Manley Hopkins, but David read only half of it. And set me up to read the other half for you. And that fits right in with that self. I read the first part once more. As kingfishers, you know, the kingfishers are these birds, these shiny birds, and they fly up after it gets dark, usually live by the water, and it gets already dark, and then the sun is setting and they fly up, their wings still catch once more this last sunlight. So as kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. When on a summer day, looks like a jet stream behind them. As tumbled over rim as tumbled over rim in roundy wells, stones ring. This put a big stone over the rim of the well and goes bloop, and the little one goes blip. And each one has its own voice. That's his point. Each thing has its own voice. Like each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves. That's what it does. That self that is in each thing, not only in us, we are also a thing, some body. That self, that comes out in what everything does. The dragonfly and the kingfisher and the stones. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells, selves, goes itself. Myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. And that is as far as David read it. And it was okay for yesterday. But now, the poet, the human being who writes this, says, I say more. I say more. And each one of us can say, I say more. The just one justices. That's a very difficult line. That is our more as a human being. We can and must adjust to the universe. And all these other things are adjusted from the beginning. That is our great task, our great difficulty, and our glory, that we can do it. Freely we adjust. The others are simply selving. We have to adjust to self. I say more. The just one justices. And now he says how the just one justices. And that has nothing to do with legal justice at all. It's this adjusting, how he describes it, keeps grace. So the dancer is the perfectly adjusted human being. Keeps grace, that grace of a dancer. That keeps all his goings graces. It keeps all his goings graces. And then he repeats again what that means. Acts in God's eyes what in God's eyes he is. Christ. Everyone. Or Buddha. Or Atman. So, I say more than all these things who self. The just one justices. Keeps grace. That keeps all his goings graces. Acts in God's eyes what in God's eyes he is, Christ. And now he explains this once more for us. For Christ plays, dances, plays, that cosmic Christ, plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes, not his, in the faces of, plays to the Father through the features of human faces. That is what we can admire. That is that self that plays through all of us, through every eye that is around. That one self, that one cosmic self, that one mysterious divine self, if you want to use that term, plays through each one of us. And now you can ask, why are there so many of us? Well, because that one self is so inexhaustible that it wants to express itself over and over again in ever new ways. And that is our uniqueness. There have never been two people alike, even identical twins, very different in many ways. So we have at the same time, we can treasure our uniqueness and our oneness. Really, really one and absolutely unique. And how do we live differently if we keep that in mind? We live differently because we will always, no matter how different the other one gets and how nasty and really unpleasant, remember it's me. Me. Basically, it's me. The I is totally different. The self is only one self. That's why it says, love your neighbor, and that's in one form or the other in every spiritual tradition. Love your neighbor as yourself, not like yourself. That would already mean you are two, and then you make these acrobatics of liking somebody else like you would like yourself if you were somebody else. That leads absolutely nowhere. It's very simple. Love your neighbor because you are one. You're oneself. And how can you not love yourself? Love means saying yes to belonging in all its forms. Love is the great yes to belonging. And you can't deny that you belong to that self. That is yourself. So you belong whether you like it or not. That's what your self is. And so you love also your neighbor as that self, which is yourself. In the monastery in which I'm now spending a lot of time in Austria, we have once a month a special Eucharistic service for children, and then afterwards a puppet show. They're very popular in Austria, these puppet shows. And the monks play puppets. And I always get the idea that the self is like a great puppeteer, you see, playing at the same time with one hand the princess and with the other one the dragon. When you find yourself confronted with the dragon, you might as well remember it's one puppeteer that's playing all this. Of course, it's only an image. It's only an image. But what stands behind it is a deep insight that we are all one in spite of being so different. And yet now we also understand what happens when we forget that we are all one. When this little somebody thinks to be alone. This aloneness, this alienation, forgets that we are all one. And what is the first thing that must come, inevitably, is fear. When I am confronted only with all the egos that are in this room, I should get fearful. But there are several billions around, so I would just be shaking this little nobody surrounded by all this. And out of the fear grows violence, which is always the first thing that comes from fear. And wherever you see violence, you can ask yourself the first thing, what is the fear behind it? Because that's how we overcome violence, by looking what's the fear behind it. Violence is not, it's bravado, is whistling in the dark. That's what violence always is. So violence is the first thing that springs from fear. The next thing is competition. There are all these other little eyes around, and so I have to use my elbows. And the next thing is greed. There isn't enough for all of us, so I have to have something. I have to pull things to me, because otherwise they're pulling it away. So all the things that we do not want in this world spring simply from forgetting that we are one, and the I that forgets that self at that point turns into the ego. The ego isn't another actor on the stage. There's only the I and the belonging of the I to the self. But when the I forgets that self, it shrivels up. And that shriveled up I, that is the ego. And unfortunately, there isn't a world of egos in the world of I myself, but there is I who 50 times in the course of a day shrivel up and then open up again and shrivel up and then open up again. We go back and forth between forgetting that we are all one and acting accordingly and shriveling up. And so that is already partially the answer to what does it mean to wake up. The ultimate waking up is to wake up to the self, that we are all one. But many things grow out of that, of course. It helps to remember our best, most awake moments. And our most awake moments are the peak moments that Abraham Maslow, several times it was referred to, and Maslow gave them that name. But originally Maslow called these peak moments mystic experiences. Experiences of oneness with all. And he also said, to the extent to which one can generalize in psychology, one could say that all people, as far as we know, have these peak experiences, but not all people recognize them. Not all people, and even those who somehow recognize them are afraid of them. Why? Because we want to keep things under control. And Maslow even singled out whole professions, for instance, accountants. He said they have great difficulty acknowledging their peak experiences, because professionally they have to keep everything nicely under control, and they think of those moments in which they lose control as a momentary insanity. And Maslow suggests, well, maybe that was their only sane moment. Peak experiences or psychedelic experiences. You can't distinguish between them. You cannot distinguish between mystic experiences and psychedelic experiences, not between the experience. And Houston Smith has most eloquently spoken about it and given examples for that. But what really matters is not the experience. What really matters is what you make out of the experience. And that is the decisive thing. And that leads, of course, to the question, how do we stay awake and how do awake people act? So we live in, it has been called a bundle of social relations, beautifully, and social synaptic structures, very elegant. I would call it a beautiful mandala made out of these relationships. We stand in this mandala of relationships. When you look at sometimes at these beautiful images that we saw, the symmetry of flowers, and there you almost see those lines that connect us with all other humans, with all animals, with all plants, with all rocks and everything there is. We stand in this, and for us, each one of us is the center of this whole. And that's perfectly all right. What else can we do? The center is everywhere. Everywhere is the center. And the circumference is nowhere. And that is how the divine mystery was defined. That which has its center everywhere and its circumference nowhere. And that is ultimately the awakening to that mystery. a mystery that we are to ourselves. We are totally embedded in this mystery, and we are confronted with it at the same time. That is the mysterious thing. And we must activate it. Even our doing is totally mysterious to us. How can we do it? How? So these questions, why, and what, and how, those are the great questions that lead us deep into that mystery. And in our saying I, we come back to this starting point. When I say I am already connected to that mystery, because when you carefully look, and Martin Buber was one who helped us see that, when you carefully look, when you say I, you have already presupposed a thou. The I makes no sense without this thou. And that thou precedes the I. Otherwise, I could never say I except in respect to this thou. And that leads us totally into this mystery, this relationship between I and thou. And you could say, maybe that is just a sort of a generic picture of all my human relationships. Piece together, and I create, at first it's my mother, and then other people who come in, and so, no, it goes deeper. It is the relationship of my I to something that is transcendent, goes beyond. And how can we show that? How can I show it to you? I can not only remind you, you live your life as a story. It's not one episode after the other, but it's a story. You think of your life as a story. And you want to tell that story to someone. And the more you love somebody, the more you want to tell that story. And always it's not successful. There's always a little something left that you don't get in there. And yet you tell that story constantly. To whom are you telling it? To that thou. To that thou that is totally mysterious. And I said yesterday, but I repeat it because it's so important. By mystery, I don't mean anything fuzzy. I mean that which you cannot grasp, cannot get into your grip, but which you must be grasped to understand it. You can understand it, but you can't grasp it. Understanding is putting yourself inside of it. One of my Zen teachers used to say, "Oh, you people in the West, you always say you want to understand. What you really want is to overstand." You know? He said, "You're like people who go into the shower and put up an umbrella." We don't want to get wet, you see. We want to see it like the child says, "What is it like to die?" I don't want to do it, I just want to know. We don't want to live, we don't want to get into this life, you see. But when we get into this life, then we live our life in the light of that I-thou relationship to the mystery. And I so like this question this morning. The you see, this you is the light in which the I does what it does. It's another way of talking about this life story that you tell. The you, this Rilke, the poet, calls it the naked you. You see, the naked you. The ultimate you. That ultimate you is the light in which the I does what it does, and what it does best. And in the Psalms, this shows, we could quote something from the Upanishads probably, and something from any sacred scripture in the world. I quote from the Psalms, in you, that's this great you, in you is the fountain of life, and in your light we see light. In your light we see light, and any light that we see is in light of that relationship to the great mysterious you, in that relationship in which I stand from the moment I say I. And that is perfectly compatible with the view that everything is fleeting and that nothing is a fixed reality. No reality is fixed. Everything is constantly changing. Every atom, every molecule in our body is exchanged, I think every 7 years, they say, or something like that. The self, how come you recognize somebody after 8 years? Huh? What do you recognize? The self recognizes the self. And so this is perfectly compatible. All that remains, and it was there from the beginning, is that relationship. It's a relationship, not something. It's a relationship. But every time the body changes all over, it still has that same relationship. The relationship. After everything is gone, all that remains is relationship, and not only a bundle of relationships, but a marvelous mandala of these relationships. So one could also say that awakening is an awakening to that mystery which is life. Do you have life, or does life have you? I can't answer the question. Both answers are correct. I certainly have life. I speak of my life, and I have to live my life. It's a great task. But certainly life has me. Life is digesting my food. I could never do it. I can't even name. I think no scientist can name all the enzymes it takes to digest our food. We couldn't live for a day if we had to do it. Life does it. We are embedded in this mystery. And life is totally mysterious. But now we come to the question, once we wake up to this mystery in which we are embedded and which is at the same time we are that mystery and we are related to it, once we come to that point, we have to ask, how can we stay awake? How do we stay awake? What do we do? And there, the answer that I have found, and it certainly isn't the only answer, I'm sure, but one that works, and therefore I feel it's a real gift when one can share it, is grateful living. Through grateful living, you can stay awake in the full sense. And first I have to make sure that we all have the same understanding. What does gratefulness mean? What is gratitude? And I would say gratitude always arises spontaneously in any human heart when something is given to us that is valuable and is freely given. These two things must come together. It's valuable and it's freely given. There are no strings attached. I don't have to pay, I don't have to trade anything in, I don't have to work for it, freely given. And then, when I become aware of that, joy rises in my heart. And that joy is the gratitude. Saying thank you is additional. That's a very nice social custom, but it's totally unimportant. The important thing is the joy that arises when I recognize that something valuable is freely given to me. And now the next step, what is the most valuable thing anybody can think of? The next moment in life, because if that weren't given to you, whatever else you wish for is not there. The given moment. And that is absolutely freely given. There's nothing you can do, even if you want, to buy another one. It's a free gift, the greatest gift is every moment freely given to us, now and now and now. And to become aware of that gift, that is grateful living. And we have a very simple, I should refer you, I think it's even in the brochure somewhere mentioned, but the website, gratefulness.org, www.gratefulness.org, our website, you find lots and lots of things that I would like to share with you, but can't share with you here in this short time. But one thing that we always emphasize is there's a very simple method of living gratefully or staying awake. That's one and the same. And that is stop, look, go. That's all. Stop, look, go. Over and over and over in your day. Stop. Because if you don't stop, you are in this rush. We live in this very fast time, and we rushed past before we can even appreciate life, before we can be in the present moment. And in the present moment, everything happens. Now. So you have to stop and get into the now. But you don't have to stop long. It's wonderful if you have a practice of meditation, say half an hour a day or whatever it is, but even that isn't going to help you. If you practice meditation half an hour a day and rush through life the rest of the time, it doesn't do you any good. And if you don't practice, although it's recommendable, but if you don't practice and yet moment by moment have these little split seconds where you wake up, stop, look. And that look is important because then you see, what does life offer me at this present moment? It's something different. It's always a gift, and it's always opportunity. Because the gift within every gift is opportunity. That is the key word. What you're grateful for is opportunity. If these beautiful flowers, when I look at them, joy rises in my heart, gratefulness rises in my heart. But what I'm really grateful for is the opportunity to see and smell and enjoy them. Because if the same flowers were standing outside in the hall, I would not have this opportunity. So it's the opportunity that life offers us. That is what we are really thankful for, grateful for. And so opportunity. Stop, or else you will miss the opportunity. Look, or else you will overlook the opportunity. And the third thing is act. Go, do something with it. It doesn't help you if you just stop and look and then don't do anything with the opportunity that life offers you in this present moment. But life is so generous. That's another aspect of its mystery, of this mystery character. It's so generous that if you miss this opportunity, the next moment already brings you another opportunity. And if you miss that one, the next moment. Moment by moment, one after the other. And if you take this opportunity, it leads again to another opportunity. We go through life gifted over and over by everything there is. And you can now connect the stop, look, go with aspects of the mystery. It's absolutely not necessary every moment in life to think of mystery. You're already embedded in it, but it helps to see how the stop connects us with the darkness of mystery, the darkness of life, that ground out of which life comes. Where does life come from? We don't know. We might be able one day to pin, and I think we are pretty close to that, scientifically to find the point where inanimate matter turns into animate matter, that we will almost certainly find that point, but that doesn't tell us anything about life. And besides, if the inanimate matter didn't already have the potential to become animate. It would also, so everything is in a sense alive. And there's no upper limit to life. There's no point where I can say, now I'm as alive as I can possibly be. No, there's always more and more possibilities to grow into that. So it's the stop that lets you down into that darkness of life. It's the look that opens your eyes to the light of life in every respect. Of course, it is with all your senses you are to look, so to say, listen, and smell, and taste, and be completely open. And from look and from darkness to light, the next step to go is enlightenment. Because enlightenment is doing something, not sitting there and being enlightened, and that's the end of it. You can only be sure that somebody is enlightened when they act enlightened. And that is our great task, to stop, look, and go as enlightened beings, as beings who have stopped and looked long enough to see the light. And that means to see our embedding in everything, of which we have already spoken. And therefore, grateful living is not a private affair. Spirituality is never a private affair. Spirituality means aliveness. That's its literal meaning. So it can never be a private affair. But grateful living all the more is a building of networks among networks among networks and being connected. It's a revolution. It's a communal affair, and it's revolutionary. I remember this is already quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years, 12 years ago, I had the opportunity to be in a pretty small group with the Dalai Lama for several days. And at first people were asking him all the predictable questions, and he was giving all the predictable answers, and you could just tell how bored he was. So finally I said, Your Holiness, don't you think we need a revolution? Oh, there he woke up. Revolution is that. Revolution, we need a revolution. And from then on, this word revolution came over and over and over again in his talks, and he was always saying, revolution. And then he would look at me. What kind of a revolution? Not the typical kind of revolution where the pyramid of power is simply turned upside down, and those who were on the bottom are now on the top and do exactly the same thing that the others did before. A revolution that revolutionizes our very notion of revolution. That's what we need. And that comes about by loving others. So the stop is an expression of our trust, because if you don't trust even the darkness, you can't stop. The look is an expression of our openness for surprise. If you look and are not prepared and open for surprise, that's no real looking. You look and you're open for surprise, and you act, and your very action says yes to belonging. That's what was our little definition of love. It's the limitless yes to belonging. So all the great virtues that every tradition has, this trust, this openness for surprise, that yes to belonging. In the Christian tradition it's called faith, trust, hope, openness for surprise, yes to belonging, love. It's all in there by grateful living. And it is revolutionary because it turns that pyramid of power into a network, not into a new pyramid, into a network, now into that beautiful mandala where we are all interwoven with one another. And it replaces the pyramid that is created by the ego, the fear of the little ego that leads to violence, that leads to competition, that leads to greed, is replaced by a network of trust. Huh? It's the opposite of fear, is trust. Trust, peace, which is so much more than the absence of war. It is the fullness, it is the flowering, particularly of interhuman relations. It leads to cooperation instead of competition, and it leads to sharing instead of greed and hoarding. And that world, a world of networks within networks, of sharing and trust and peace, that is the vision that Barbara put before us the other day. That is the world that we long for. And that comes through awakening to our oneness in the self, our wonderful, beautiful diversity as I next to one another, and our we, that great miracle of we, as Ken Wilber calls it, the miracle of we, that working together, that network. And I hope that I trust that this event here has contributed quite a bit to promoting just that on our world, and for that I'm particularly thankful. I think we have time for a few questions. Yes?
I would like to ask about... You spoke very shortly, in a short way, about the darkness. Trust in the darkness. But I'm not exactly sure what you were talking about when you talked about darkness. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yes. Probably a good point to start would be that we in our life experience those dark moments, as we call them, or dark areas. And they are aspects of that mystery, because the fact that we can't grasp it, can't get it in our grip, that means already that it is not a metaphor, that it is dark to us. We can't see it. But it is at the same time everything that we can see, because everything that we see is the light that comes out of the darkness. Light comes out of the darkness. So that also is mystery. The oneness of the darkness. Rilke has a lot to say about loving the darkness more than the light, because the light divides in all these things, but the darkness holds everything together. So there's this oneness, and then out of that oneness comes the light, and the multiplicity out of that oneness. And then again, the cooperation, and that is the dynamic aspect, but you didn't ask about it. But the darkness, that is how I would lead towards it.
So are you saying the darkness, in a sense, is the potential of what can be?
Yes, potential, but not a mere potential, but the fullness of everything before it comes to, it's also the nothing. You see, Buddhists often call it the nothing. It's the nothing, but not no thing, but not an empty nothing, but a pregnant nothing, pregnant with everything there is. And that moment when everything springs out from nothing into everything, from oneness into multiplicity, that is that tremendous moment. That is every moment. Every moment it happens. Now.
I've been waiting for a long time for the right person to ask this question to. There are, 7 billion individuations of consciousness on this planet. Perhaps billions more in other parts of the universe. And many of these beings, and myself, the one question that seems to be basic is, what is our purpose in life? I once heard something that to me spoke to that purpose, and it was something that this person called the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not bore God. Would you speak on that?
I like that very much. I forgot now who it was, but a few days I heard about it, maybe you will remember, where somebody said, why did God create the world? In other words, why did this mystery out of oneness come into all this multiplicity? God was bored. Certainly, that's a good answer. It's an image, but it's a very good answer. Yeah. Thank you. Good question.
I've heard you talk about the other Rilke poem of the bees and the honeycomb.
Yes.
Could you reflect on that in light of his question?
Yes. You think that was part of the question?
No, I take that back.
No.
Brought it to my mind.
That is maybe an answer to the question, what are we doing here on this world? Why aren't we just that wonderful self? Why do we have to be all these individual eyes? Or we know that what's our life all about? We know that life is about development. Life is development. We can all agree on that. Now, but since we live in this double realm, we have two kinds of development in our life. And one is the bodily, not limited to the body, but everything that has to do with space and time. That is development in the sense in which plants develop, from a seed to a little sprout, and to blossoms and to fruit, and then decay again. And that is what happens to us. We come together and we fall apart again. And then we have this, we live in this double realm, we belong also to the self. So how does the self develop? Does the self develop? Is all I do lost, or is it doing something for that great mysterious self? That is a deep question that many of us carry within ourselves. And Rilke again gives that beautiful answer. He says, we humans are the bees of the invisible, the honey bees of the invisible. And all that we suffer and all that we create and all that we do in life is we gather the nectar of the sense, of the visible, he says, of that which we can appreciate with our senses, and we need this body to have senses. We gather the nectar of the visible into the great golden honeycomb of the invisible. And that great golden honeycomb of the invisible is, if you want, the self. And so everything that we suffer contributes to that treasure. That's another way of developing, like one develops a museum collection or a wonderful photo album. And that's also developed. That sense of development is that bringing of the nectar of all that we can grasp and appreciate with our senses into the great golden honeycomb of that which goes beyond. Thank you.